Dear colleagues, the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center begins the regular press briefing on the situation with the reforms, and I'm pleased to invite Mr. Kachka. Good afternoon. We have a lot of events today in the city. That's why I'm speaking on behalf on many speakers who might be here. Yesterday we had very important voting in Verkhovna Rada. It was about looking for trade-off about the registrators of cash operations, and I would like to speak about this the importance of this decision for the reforms in general. There was very intensive dispute on this, very intensive debate on the use of the cash operations registrators, and now the private entrepreneurs of the second and third groups should have the turnover over 1 million hryvnia compulsory should have cash operations registrators, and this was reflected in the new piece of legislation. On the other hand, the obligatory use of cash operations registrators for those entrepreneurs who have turnover of more than 1 million of hryvnia and had to deal with the same and had other obligations for them. This obligation is introduced from July 1st. So on one hand, this is one step back. Yesterday, European Business Association mentioned that this is really one step back. Now, on the other hand, this is a very sensitive issue for small businesses, and it used to be a very sensitive issue for all European countries, small businesses, because on the other hand, I think it's a good achievement that we have not delayed or postponed implementation of this provision, but we simply modified this provision. I should state that this very reform is among the most unpopular reforms, and it used to be so in many European countries. And the second important step is that yesterday Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine has appointment the head of the state food safety service. This service was established in September upon resolution of the Cabinet of Ministers, and unfortunately, due to some circumstances, it took a long period of time for the selection commission, for the competition commission, to appoint the head of the service. This service has to unite four food inspections related to all aspects of food safety, and actually application of the head of the service for such a long period of time had been hampering the reform. And now when the head of the service is finally appointed, we expect that next week he will present his short-term action plan, and we expect that this service will immediately got involved into implementation of the new legislation on food safety. On September 20 this year, new legislation on safety of food products will come to force, and this will influence producers of dairy, meat products, food producers, etc. On the other hand, this legislation will have a huge impact upon our exports. And you probably know that Ukraine produces much more dairy products and meat and other food products in much more amounts that it is able to consume, and non-compliance with this new legislation hampers this export. And of course, export depends very much on the limitations imposed by those countries which to which we export. And quite recently Kazakhstan imposed such limitations because of the insufficient proofs of quality, and thus we understood that non-existence and not proper work of this food safety service is hampering our export development. That's why we believe that the food safety service will very soon become effective, and it will both act in the interests of consumers and in the interests of producers, promoting export of Ukrainian products. And one of the most important news as of today is the day of reforms in the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. Today in the Verkhovna Rada's agenda they have quite a number of laws of reformative nature which they have to pass after second reading, and in particular the major emphasis is made on the reform of law enforcement agencies, and currently in the pipe they have the law on the law 2561, 28 22 28 62. So these are on the Ministry of Interior, the patrol service, the traffic inspection service, the state intelligence, the State Investigations Bureau, etc. I believe that the law on the law enforcement is a framework nature. The law on the national police is actually the statute of the newly created police service, and today we will have the graduation ceremony from the police academy, and if the law on national police this will allow the graduates of this police academy to start their work based on new approach. This law enforcement bloc has to finalize the work on law enforcement reform. And when this package of laws is passed, this will allow us to follow up very closely the implementation of this law and observe everyday changes in every work of all law enforcement agencies. Also, I would like to draw your attention to the possibility that after second reading, the following laws might be passed. The law on electronic petitions, and this will mark the new generation of dialogue between civil society and public authorities. This will allow people to approach to the authorities based on new basis. And then there is the second reading of the law on the Chamber of Accounts. The Chamber of Accounts has to become the instrument of the external audit, monitoring supply and the use of resources. This very law is based on the Ukraine's commitments made in the association agreement related to the administration of public finance. The law on the utility tariffs sets the obligation to set tariffs based on some specific criteria. Also, the law on the fund for securing deposits, secure deposits. It extends responsibilities and of this fund. Also, it is possible that the law on e-commerce will be passed after second reading. This draft law had been drafted for a long time, and now it is expected that it will push up e-commerce. And of course, many of us observed that Propel Uber payment systems are very much expected in Ukraine, and this is a very broad piece of legislation which will enable for the development of the e-commerce market. The next law, which is expected to be passed after second reading, this is the law on private-public partnership, which will allow to involve private funds for the socially important infrastructural projects. Our legislation in this area already exists, but it is not workable.
The draft law 1058 improves the current legislation, not theoretically, but on the basis of what has been happening in Ukraine. It's clear that the attention will be drawn to the draft law on local elections, but we need to talk about that in the context of decentralization. And finally, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that in the first reading, the draft law 2431 should be approved on methodology of fines, which are applied by Anti-Monopoly Committee of Ukraine. That is a very technical issue, very small one, but in fact, it is very important for the business, Ukrainian business, and for foreign investments, because non-transparency, not which was in the anti-monopoly, the problem for anti-monopoly committee was important to define on which terms which fine will be applied by the anti-monopoly committee of Ukraine. There has always been one of the requirements of business to anti-monopoly committee. Unfortunately, the anti-monopoly committee has not been approving this methodology, and that is why some of the MPs suggested this quite unusual step to establish it at the level of the law of Ukraine. And finally, this is the law of finding compromise. Yesterday we started our briefing from the information on compromise on the registrators, and today we hope there will be a compromise found on the restrictions of regulating the beer circulation in Kiev. To understand this problem, in winter the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine changed the classification of beer, started classifying it as an alcoholic drink, and the regulations and the restrictions were applied to that. After consultations with brewers, the government agreed to correct it, and now the governmental draft finds the balance between feasible and non-feasible restrictions as to circulation of beer without cancelling its classification as alcoholic drink. That's normal and constructive approach to reforms when ideologists of reforms recognize some mistakes. So even if some of the drafts are approved in the Verkhovna Rada, this will be a revolutionary step which would allow the parliament to have in a couple of weeks some vacations, because this legislative work opens new opportunities for the government as to implementation of reforms. Thank you for attention. If you have any questions, if you would like to express your wishes of what you would like to see in the future, then please see you next time, Taras. And in 10 minutes we will have a round table, modernization of energy sector in Ukraine.